Welcome to another episode of The Catholic Couple, having fun with faith, family, and friends. I'm your co-host, Bobby Fredrickson. With me, as always, my beautiful wife,
Katie Fredrickson.
I'm the Convert Catholic, and she's
the Cradle Catholic.
And here we are on a brand new episode with a special guest. We have with us today Mary Bruno, coming from the north side of New Orleans.
Oh, right. I don't think they say it like that in actual New Orleans. So I got corrected.
They don't say New Orleans, that's for sure. It's
no.
New Orleans.
It's New Orleans is probably the closest.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you for taking the time here. This is kind of a sad day in the Catholic world. Our Pope Francis has passed away this morning. So we have set up this interview a while ago. So we're not going to get too much into the Pope Francis stuff, but just for some context at the time. But we are in this octave of Easter still. We just celebrated Easter. We get to celebrate 50 days of the joy of the resurrection. So we decided that we're going to go a little bit deeper and to keep the hope. The hope is there, but we're going to also go deeper to understand that through pain, through suffering, through these things that
human existence,
it can lead us to that joy. So Katie's going to drive most of this show. And
because I found you, I listened to a podcast called FAbM Spotlight with Oscar Rivera, which is really good. Check that out. And I really, your story was very real. And I immediately texted Bob. I'm like, oh, I'm listening to this podcast. We have to get her on our show. So Mary, if you want to just go ahead and just open up and just tell us a little about yourself, your backstory, and your ministry.
Yeah. So like you said, my name is Mary, and I am a Creighton practitioner. I'm an author. I am the co-founder of a nonprofit organization called FAbM Base. You can find us at fambase.org. That's FAbM Base. The B is silent for reasons that are not important to get into, but right now at least. But my husband and I have been married for 12 years, and we have one adopted daughter who we're so blessed to know. And it's just crazy how things like that happen, because one of the greatest sources of my suffering is infertility. But if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have our beautiful daughter, who is now 8 years old. Aww. And we're in the process to adopt again. Been waiting about 5 years. So yeah, God's timing. I'm really at peace with it. So just kind of waiting on him. And that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned, is just how to trust in God, because he's been so faithful. And now I really feel like I've learned that the hard way, but it's so helpful moving forward, no matter what my suffering is, because we're all going to experience suffering. Like, it's just not something we can escape. We can choose not to enter into it like fully. But that's what I've found, is through that entering into it, is that it doesn't get rid of the suffering, but there's so much growth and beauty that come from it. And that's what I'm living today.
Wow.
Amen. Yeah, we've just had on a guest, Megan. She had a book called Offered Up. Yeah. So especially during this time of Lent and the suffering is, like you said, entering into it, which it's going to happen one way or the other to you, but how we choose to respond to the thing that we're not getting that we may want, or physical pain, or any of those kinds of things that are foisted upon us, not by our own choice. And we suffer also from the choices that we do make, which doesn't make it any easier or harder. But Jesus did promise that he would be with us, and that if we can get that consolation, it can definitely make it easier. But what stood out about the...
Well, I mean, do you want to go a little into your, like, what, I don't want to say like your whole suffering story, but like what was it that you went through that made you have those realizations?
Yeah. So the reason that I became infertile and remained infertile was because I had a disease called endometriosis and adenomyosis, which is a women's health issue that is pretty common. I think 1 in 10 women have it, but many times it causes pain to varying degrees. Not all the time. Sometimes the only symptom is infertility. But for me, when I started my cycle, actually before I even started my first cycle, I had pain, and then that got worse as I aged. And for some women, it just gets really bad. And I was just unfortunately one of those women. And so that was half the battle for me, was the physical suffering that I had with that disease, where I ended up having to have a medical hysterectomy in 2020. And that was my 12th surgery. So I had some surgeries about every 2 years, and some things would get better, but the adenomyosis was a later diagnosis. I had a lot of scar tissue, and it was just a lot on my body. But the other part of my suffering was actually, I always describe as worse, and that was the infertility. Like the reason I waited so long to have the hysterectomy is because it was just such a huge desire to have a baby. And that meant not being able to have a baby. So I would have rather go through that physical suffering to keep that hope alive. But God did so much. He moved so much during that time. And so, I mean, with the physical suffering, there were several times that I could only get relief at the emergency room with morphine, just to give you like a gauge of how bad it would get. I describe it in one of my books. It's kind of like a freight train coming at me every month with nothing I could do. I just got to wait for it to hit. And then eventually it became like almost every day. It wasn't even, just that time of the cycle, but there's a place that you get to when you're in such intense pain, and there's nothing you can do, where you just lay at the feet of Jesus on the cross, like trying to survive. And so while I am so grateful to be past that and be able to live my life now without those physical impediments, there are parts of that I actually strangely miss. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but I got to taste the cross in such this unique way that I just wouldn't have been able to had I not been in so much pain, because I know only Jesus knew what I was feeling. And so that I just kind of look back on as a gift, even though, I'm glad I don't have to experience that anymore. But that was just an interesting taste of Jesus I got to experience. But then again, it was the emotional suffering of infertility. I grew up as a Catholic, and a wonderful Catholic family, which gave me the gift of my faith that I continue to grow in today. But I've always been a devout Catholic, and surrounded by, lots of children and babies. That's a big conversation in our church. It's what we mainly witness. And even though it is not like directly stated all the time, it's something that you just kind of absorb, that you're supposed to have babies. And obviously that's what most people want. And it's a good and beautiful thing. And so, but I just kind of internalized it as something that if I don't do, then I am not fruitful, or I am not this beautiful child of God, or I'm worthless as a wife, as a Catholic woman.
Yeah.
If you would have asked me that, I wouldn't have said that overtly, but it just kind of got absorbed. And with the ministry that I do, where I reach out, I speak to a lot of infertile women, that seems to be common. So I'm trying to change the conversation in our church to where we can open it up a little bit more. Yes, being open to new life in any and all of its forms, and living out our fruitfulness, however God chooses to gift us with it, is beautiful. And so, but yeah, it was actually through becoming infertile that I realized how fruitful I was. So the only time I ever really questioned God was in the worst day that I experienced infertility. I had a false positive pregnancy test, and it was about 2 years into it. And I was just like, seriously? Are you kidding me? Like,
pregnancy test, it said you were positive. You thought you were pregnant.
Correct.
You went through the next steps, which is calling your doctor and all of that.
Yeah. And I got my blood drawn, and then 24 hours later, it takes about a day for you to get those results. I didn't go into my doctor's office. I just went to a lab.
Okay.
And so I was cautiously optimistic, because I had never had a positive before. It was different though, like something new. So I obviously had some new hope. And the next day she called me and told me that I wasn't pregnant. And the helpful part about that was that up until then, I just really didn't give my permission to be honest about how angry I was, and how disappointed I was, and how confused, and how much I questioned God. Like, why me? We saved sex for marriage. We did all the things right. We're supposed to have babies. Like, that's what I'm supposed to do. Right.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't happening. And I just didn't understand. So it was, I call it a tough love moment, where I just really dropped to my knees, and I was like, I stared at the cross above the door. And I was just like, how could you do this to me? And God, he just put it on my heart. He was just like, do you love me? And I said, I had to make a decision at that point. And that's when I learned love is a choice. And I said, yes, yes, I will love you. And that was really when everything changed. I kind of stepped outside of myself and started thinking about his plans rather than my own.
Yeah.
And it was about 3 months after that we started the adoption process, and the fruit just started to flow, you know.
I think that it's not a bad thing to get mad at God. I think it signifies a relationship, right?
Yeah.
That we wrestle with God, right? That we contend with this, and when things, when we think we're doing what we're being called to do, and then it's not working out, it's like, what do you want from me, right? And I think that that's such a beautiful moment of just pure. That's a relationship, because in relationships you're not going to always be on the same page, right? And you're going to have disagreements. And if you're going to have a relationship with God, I think that that's a normal response. I think that's so beautiful, and I think that is so vulnerable. So within that context, where is your marriage in all of that? Like, how was your husband in that moment?
Those
Because that's got
tough
to be
conversations.
a very
It's
difficult.
hard as a man to be on the outside of that, because
Yeah.
our bodies have
Well,
have no connection to
and
our
men just want to fix
our
everything. Like,
yeah. We're just like, hey,
he couldn't
what can I
fix
do to make
that.
it right? Yeah,
What,
all
right.
those kinds
And
of
my husband's an engineer, so he like really wants to
really
fix it.
wants to kind of reverse engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that, because at that point, like, that was something that, and it could go lots of ways, right? Like, every marriage is unique, every person is unique. For us, this really drew us closer together. It wasn't until later on, when we had our issues with well, I was having painful intercourse, which is another story, that we had a lot more difficult conversations. But with this, especially with the physical pain, the way that Chris loved me through that, uh and not to mention, I didn't say this, but I actually got diagnosed with endometriosis. We were together for 7 months only, and I got the diagnosis, which was like with a disease that can make it difficult to have children. And he just never flinched, which showed me who he was really in love with me, and not what I could give him, or not,
Right.
Family was very important to both of us. We both desired to have children. He had a lot of nieces and nephews, 3 siblings. So that was really beautiful. Also, some of my surgeries were out of state. Most of my surgeries, 11 out of 12 of them, were out of state. And so he flew with me to those surgeries before we were married. I think I had 3 or 4 before we were married. He proposed to me 2 nights before my biggest surgery.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
we flew to Omaha, and I had just got my ring, and then I had to take it off. It was really painful to do that. But um and then my brother and my dad both mentioned being able to witness that love at our rehearsal dinner. Just that it to them, it said a lot to them, just how beautiful it was that he loved me. And too, also, like, men experience the suffering of infertility very differently. So it also has to be something intentional where, I'm checking on him too. It's not just about me, but it's trying to figure out what he needs, because it's different than what I need. And
Yeah.
I guess women, we like talk about things a lot more, but the guys don't really do that. And you can speak to that too. But so figuring out how his friends can support him and how I can support him is something that I had to realize and I had to learn. And then for adoption was really interesting, because he had experience with adoption as a child. He knew children who were adopted. His parents actually started the process to adopt, but they never went through with it because they ended up getting pregnant. But I didn't know anybody who was adopted, so it was a lot more foreign to me. So one of the best things that he could have done was just, he waited patiently for me to be really in God's time, for God to move my heart. Like, he didn't bug me, he didn't nag me. And it took about a year, but it allowed me to get there when I was ready.
Wow.
And that was really fruitful. He just was patient and waited. It's not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for being so vulnerable too. And in the prayer we started with, is that when people, we talked about this with this Megan, who had the same condition as you in her book. So we talked a little bit about that, these things, that sufferings that God has specifically for us, is that they're for us, and it's for a reason. And then if we're brave enough and bold enough to share our pain and vulnerability through that, we can help other people who are going through the same problem, but at an earlier stage. Like for me, I went through a ton of suffering through back pain. I had back surgery as a young guy, working out, healthy, all those things. And then to the point where I couldn't even pick up my children. And I was 10 out of 10 pain for 6 months straight, crying myself to sleep. So the pain was something like that. But in turn, it's hard when you're going through it to see, okay, well, God's using this for something. But once you get through it, the dark parts about it, and you come to terms with it, and then unite it to Christ, and you enter into it eventually. It takes a lot of stubbornness, a lot of times, a lot of fighting, a lot of arguing, a lot of saying why and this, and if I would have said this different, or you just start going through all these scenarios. But eventually, if you're wise and you learn from those things, then you start to see, okay, all right, I get it, God. I can help other people who are going through similar things. Like guys I work with, it's normal. My job's very physical. So a lot of guys have back pain. So they reach out to me first. Hey, what am I going to do? This physical therapy, or I need to do these shots, or I need to do this, or these stretches, or this, or my back. Or it's like, I'm helping people all the time about back stuff. It's like, I never would have thought in a million years that, but I can help somebody. Like one guy today, we were talking about it. He just had shots. They're not working. So I'm like, okay, well, it's like, well, the microdiscectomy, it's like all these little things, but he's using me to try to help them to see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that, and then our mental state is a big part of suffering. And then I hurt my back again a second time. I was off work for 8 months, and it didn't start getting better until I changed my mindset on it. Instead of that woe is me kind of a like, argue with God, okay, to have those conversations, but you can't stay in it forever, because he literally wants to heal you in the ways that he wants to, but you have to allow it. And your mindset has a big deal about it, that, for a long time, everyone always asked me, well, how's your back? It's like, okay, now I'm just the guy who's got a back injury. It's like, everyone's how you doing? You're back at work. And like every conversation is about this. Like, so I had to like snap out of like feeling sorry for myself. Like, no, and I started getting better just by changing my mindset, but not being, that isn't who I am, back injury Bob, it's like, but that's how it can be. But if we allow it to help other people, then it can be transformed into something. And I think that's what you're getting into, is that obviously if you chose to do it, you'd want it to be different. But now that we can't go back, we can't change reality, but you can help other people who are struggling on how to go about the adoption process, how to handle that with the marriage, how to have these tough conversations, how to suffer well, how to like all those kinds of things. It's beautiful that God can take something as bad as that and bring something good out of it. And that's the God that we worship. He's somebody, like, I'm rereading Genesis and Joseph, the whole story is that which you meant for bad, God meant it for good. And he finds a way to bring a greater good out of something as hard as is for you, painfully, spiritually, and things like that. So your brave witness can really help other people, hopefully, who are listening and watching, to say, okay, oh, I'm not the only one. It's not me, because it is more common, and we're hearing about this all the time. It's more and more.
Well, that's what, I want to get into is you've written books, you're an author. You also you're a public speaker. You speak on various topics. So you've taken these things that you've experienced, and you have, now it's like your platform on several different topics, right? So like, what are the main topics that your platform, your voice, that you feel strongly about, and that you're able to then take these moments in your life and transform them into that greater good? What are some topics that you've unpacked in those books and speaking and all that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Mainly I think, well, I use infertility, I think, to make a lot of different points, because there is a lot that can be spoken directly into the heart of the infertile. So that is a big part of my heart, that I can help them with what I've learned. So spiritual motherhood, fruitfulness. But then I really like to kind of extrapolate on that, because there are messages that are helpful to all of us. This first book that I wrote, I have it right here, 12 Stripes Deep. It's kind of like, it's a memoir, and it's written about infertility, but I really tried hard to write it in a way that everybody could connect with it, but just kind of personalize it, basically. So it's about suffering and how uniting that suffering to the cross of Jesus brings joy. The subtitle is How Infertility and Other Suffering Delivered My Greatest Joys. So there's a lot of different places I can go with that. Specifically, more recently, just the idea that how we talk about this in the church, right? Like fruitfulness. Fruitfulness is fulfilling. It's not just like bear fruit into the world. It helps the world. Like the world needs it. The world needs our fruitfulness, our gifts. That's why the world is God has made it so beautiful and colorful, right? Because he wants us to become the best version of ourselves and use the gifts that he's given us. It's not just a message for infertile couples. That's a message for everyone.
Yeah.
But I think we lose sight of that. Like we hear spiritual parenthood and we're like, oh yeah, whatever. Like that consolation prize is what it kind of feels like.
Right.
But think about the Blessed Mother, all of our spiritual fathers who are priests.
Yeah.
It's actually a big deal and we celebrate it, but we don't like vocalize that. So I hope, and I think changing that conversation, like it's not going to take away the sting of infertility, but I really do think it will help to bring us all together. Many infertile women feel very isolated because we're just like over here. Like, no, we're all one as a church. We need to be one.
Right.
And then also adoption. I had the process of adoption for me was very eye-opening as far as the pro-life movement goes. So I feel like I have a different perspective that I can speak on about that as an adoptive mother who walked with a woman in crisis pregnancy. I grew up picketing at abortion clinics with my mom, like as a child. She was very big into the pro-life movement, so that was always very important to me. But I realized I kind of had a right to that child. Like I thought I did. I'm sorry. I did not have a right, but like the way I went into it, I was just like, I'm called to be a mother in this way, a parent. Like I really didn't see the woman as a human being who is going through a great amount of suffering out of love, to give the gift of love to her child. So getting to meet
that is to
sacrifice.
not going to be able to take care of this. So I love you so much that I'm willing to give that. Yeah.
And that the woman, like, I think a lot of us would see a woman just after meeting her. Oh, she had 2 other children, or she has 2 other children. And, she looks weak. I think to a lot of people, you look at, she didn't speak English, like, poor, but like, gosh, she became my hero. She was so strong, but didn't necessarily look like that to, I think, a lot of people. So that was really, I just think we can change the language a little bit and how we talk about that in the pro-life sense. And then sexual intimacy, because I talk about sexual ethics. I have a talk on sexual ethics because I think a lot of that conversation has been missing the perspectives of women. We've had such wonderful wisdom from the men in that space, but when I got diagnosed with vaginismus, which is a painful, involuntary, spasmodic contraction of the pelvic floor in response to some type of stimulus. So for me, it made sex very painful. But I didn't know that until 9 years into marriage. Wow. I just kind of thought like, and I had all the theology of the body talks. I went out to all the retreats, and it just one day I was like, how in the world did I not know this was normal and was actually harmful to me? And me trying to hide that pain from my husband is not good for a marriage. Like, imagine that. Why wasn't this something that I should have intuited and I didn't? And I realized that, well, man, like the female perspective, what is healthy for the woman, like pelvic floor health, what is normal, what is not. Sexual intimacy starts with good communication outside of the bedroom. And so those are a lot of the things I've become passionate about.
Yeah. Could you dive? Can you unpack the healthy intimacy in a marriage part for us, like a little more?
Yeah, I don't think I mentioned my husband and I became a marriage prep mentor couple 5 years into marriage. So about 6 or 7 years ago, and we were trained in Jan and Lloyd Tate's program. It's called In-Home Marriage Prep. They teach it in various places now. It's an incredible program. And that was really helpful for us, actually, to learn about authentic sexual intimacy. But it wasn't until I had this experience that I was really able to put it into practice. But just understanding the importance of good communication and how there's levels of depth to that communication. There's 5 different levels, and the 2 deepest levels are communicating feelings and needs, because we're the most vulnerable in that space. We can get the most hurt. And so they say that a lot of married couples actually live in like the levels 1 through 3 at depth, which is just like small talk, facts. You know, it gets a little every once in a while they dip down, you know, a little bit deeper, but that it really needs to be a regular part of our lives, you know, our day-to-day lives. So anyway, once I got diagnosed with that, it just brought up a lot of stuff, and I realized I wasn't being honest with myself, and I certainly wasn't being honest with him. And so it really motivated me to have those hard conversations. And that is where we really started that. I mean, it was just, this is what God used to take us to a different level of depth. And so I always, you know, I think something else that they mentioned in this marriage prep program is that in the culture sees a successful marriage as just two people who don't get divorced. Right? I mean, like, okay,
they made it.
Yes, we made it. We're not divorced. We like can have a superficial,
which is a lot these days. You know, it's
that's half the battle.
Half the
Literally,
it is. You're absolutely right.
That's just it's superficial. Yeah.
But what God did not create us to just not get divorced. You know, He created us for so much more. To make His love tangible, and that means, you know, and you know, for many people, I think that means having the difficult conversations and being willing to do that. And so it was healing that and fixing that and focusing on the strength of our emotional intimacy that began to heal our sexual intimacy, but also that sexual intimacy starts outside of the bedroom with how we love. We can't have a healthy sexual relationship without loving ourselves and loving each other well. That's step one. And so, you know, we had to stop having sex for a very long time while I began to heal physically. And then, you know, once we were able to try it again, it got a lot fewer because you know, this is a mental journey, is a physical, is emotional, it's relational. We started going to counseling. So, and I just learned that you can have a very deep emotional connection outside of like sexual intercourse itself. That they're both important. Sexual intercourse is important and we're working towards that always. But like the most important part is actually that spiritual and emotional intimacy.
Yeah, the unitive, we say, you know, unitive and the procreative, but the connection that we have that way, and especially for men is we're more physical. That's just how we want love, receive love. It's a lot of touch, and we're not as good. I know I'm not as expressing my feelings.
Can you represent all of men?
No, I'm talking in generalities here, but for the most part, that's true for most men because that's just how we are. It's like, all right, go to work, suffer, bear it. You know, we're not gonna, you know, you're weak if you talk about your feelings and things like that. So it's some, you know, it took a lot of me growing up, and I still struggle with it. You know, we're not perfect of being, you know, how to share those emotional intimacy type things. But because ultimately, because we're scared. We're scared of showing our wounds, our vulnerabilities, because then we could be rejected, we could be hurt, we could be misunderstood, we can use that against each other. I know I'm guilty of doing things like that. So that's part of the problem of intimacy. It's this: do we trust enough to show our weakest, our heart, the parts that I'm hiding from you, maybe, or the parts that I can only show to God, or I'm too scared to show to somebody.
Do you think it's easier for women to be vulnerable and to speak on these things because of what you had said earlier, that women are the ones that are more vulnerable, that can get hurt, that are a little bit more delicate, right? But because of that, maybe it is easier for us to have, like, do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, if we are the more vulnerable ones in general in the relationship, right? We're the receivers, we could get hurt a lot easier and faster, right? Like, so it's just a little bit more easy for us.
And it probably has its pros and cons to that.
Right.
Is that by being able to be more openly vulnerable, you're going to go more intimate. You're going to go deeper. It's not going to be but it's
because you already are putting that at risk in general when you are you know, as a woman.
Yes.
Well, I think God in his intelligence, right? Like he made us male and female and complementary with good reason. We made us different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's our effort. And I talk about this in my second book, Missing Pieces, Female Perspectives on Sex for Catholic Women, is that like our goal is to work towards wholeness. He's wholeness. He's the totality of male and female.
Mm-hmm.
And so together in that one, that unity, we have that perfection, and that's what we strive for.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I mean, everybody's unique, and obviously sometimes you see the role is kind of switched where, you know, the man is a little more emotional than the woman, which is okay, but still we're each different. And I think we both have something different to bring. Mm-hmm. So, and the stereotypical combination we have with my husband and I as well, but he has taught me how to appreciate the physical more. And I kind of help him to dive more deeper into emotional conversations. So I think that it's that balance that we hopefully the goal is that we bring out the best in each other.
Yeah, it's just funny because we are a lot different. It's like, but if something's like bothering me, like I'll say it. Like I don't like hold back. Like we always say like turtles and skunks. You know, turtles marry skunks. I'm a turtle. She's a turtle and I'm a skunk. So if something's bothering me, I'm like, I'm gonna let you know. Like I'm not holding back. Like whatever the situation is. But sometimes it's superficial. It's not like, well, you know, my feelings were really hurt at work. This guy, like,
right? You don't necessarily divulge,
like what's going on, not necessarily the reasons behind it. And then I've like analyzed it, and like I need you to be there with me and hold me in this situation. You know, that's where where it becomes kind of stereotypical, like you said. But the more I read and study guys who are comprehensive, guys who are to be like Jesus, who are both the lion, but also the lamb, who can fight, protect, serve, but at the same time, hug, cry, and be that kind of person like Jesus was. Because he cried in the Bible. He was a lamb and a lion. He's personified both of those things. And it's tough. The lion comes pretty natural. How to care for children, how to deal with little girls. I coach like 6th grade girls. I'm like, why are they all so like crying, like emotional? Like
we gotta make headbands and stuff.
Yeah, so it's a learning curve for us. So it's been a journey, but being humble in it is that okay, I don't understand this as much, and I want to learn, and I'm trying to, but to be give and like to be in this journey together, understanding whatever side that you come on the spectrum, that okay, maybe you're not as physical and I'm more of my feelings, but trying to make that, like you said, whole, because it's meant that way. And sometimes they're reversed and whatever that is, but trying to see it from each other's perspective. So therefore we can go to have something deeper, something true, something truly unitive.
So Mary, how would you define intimacy? Like, what's your definition of intimacy?
I love that question. Whenever I hear the word intimacy, I think into me, see. Ooh. Like see, and I don't think I like came up with that or anything. It's just
that's very theology of the body, right? Like that is the original intent, like to fully see the other
person. That is what I think is the best way. And, we get a lot of that in sexual intercourse, especially when it's done well, when it's, unitive and procreative, but it's also not necessary for that to happen. So yeah, I think seeing the other person in as much as we can, seeing into the other person.
I like that a lot.
And that goes beyond just marriage. That goes to our relationship with God as well, is that the wounds and what we're willing to bring to him is how close we get to him. And when we receive Jesus in the Eucharist, that is true intimacy. It's a spiritual, that's why so much of what Jesus talks about throughout the Gospels is that he's the bride and we're the bridegroom. It's like that he uses that language for a reason, that, when we receive it, it's that kind of, that closer than a man and a woman together is that spiritual thing. So as close as that you want to be to God, you have to be vulnerable to lead to that intimacy as well. Because if you're hiding back and not showing God your wounds, you're not confessing the sins that are really bothering you, those deep things that they're there, you're just scared to verbalize it and bring it to him because you're worried about whatever the priest is going to think about you or whatever the situation is, because he can't heal what we don't bring to them.
Well,
That's
right.
right.
That's one way of seeing it, into me, see. But what if he's saying that to us too? Into me, see, like where we
I love that.
into him, and so when we receive the Eucharist, we're supposed to be a little bit more like Jesus every time. When we enter into Lent and we do all these things, you know, where we're trying to be that better version of ourselves that you spoke to, Mary, that better version of ourselves is supposed to be more in line with Christ's view of the world and Christ's you know, eyes. We, you know, so when we are absolutely inviting him in, but we really, what if we went into him to try to see the
we talked about this.
from
We
his
talked about
eyes?
this in the Divine Mercy episode we did last year. But when we look at the image of the Divine Mercy, we see the rays coming out. But what if those rays aren't just coming out from him? It's a two-way highway. It's our way into his heart. So it's both ways, but we only see it's coming from him, but we don't see it as the blood and the waters, the baptism and the body and the blood is our way to him, to be intimate with him. And it is that two-way street. And that's the same within a marriage. It's like give and take. It's like, okay, if you're not vulnerable, I'm not much as I'm going to be as vulnerable. It's like it's a reciprocal relationship of intimacy, and it's like the deeper you go, the more I go, and it's like, but it has to be safe, has to be true, has to be there. So, what are some ways that couples can help? So, say maybe some people are listening, and they're like, "Yeah, that sounds great. Like, I want to be intimate, but like, how do I do that? Like, what does that look like?" You know, it doesn't have to be about infertility, just in general, things that helped you.
Like, honey, I listened to this podcast,
hey,
and
like,
I want to get closer to you intimately.
You know, I love you. You know, it's like, because the physical can come pretty natural. It's like we don't got to think too hard. But it's the other stuff. It takes some strategies or work or how to do it.
It has to be intentional.
Yes. Okay. Good.
Yeah. You don't need to like tell somebody how to hold somebody's hand. That's pretty natural. But I think what takes practice and prayer, and effort is that vulnerability, and that's where we get to those two deepest levels of communicating feelings and needs. And that can be any topic, right? Whether it's work, going to the doctor, can never stop getting to know your spouse. I think we kind of think that, well, we've been together for so long, there's nothing else to know about each other. No, there's always something to know. I remember, do y'all remember that movie Fireproof? Is it Kurt Cameron?
I didn't see it. I know you saw it.
Oh,
I heard it's one of the best. Like,
it's good. Yeah. And at some point he says, like, you never stop learning. Like, you start with like a high school degree, and then you get your bachelor's, and then your master's, and then your doctorate. And like, you just want, because like in the beginning, you like put out all the stops, right?
Right.
And, you know, so to always keep learning about your spouse. And I would say one of those ways is having difficult conversations. If you haven't yet, some people, it comes more natural than others, but sharing more of yourself and I think this is important. Like you said, making it safe, be a safe person that your spouse can share with. I think that's probably something that's overlooked, you know, really take it to heart. Am I someone that my spouse can share his or her deepest feelings and needs with, and really work on that? Pray together. You know,
that's true intimate. That's even scarier.
It's more awkward than
it can be
that you do, you know, because it is very vulnerable to pray together. Actually, that's what my spiritual advisor said. You know, hold hand, like if you want to, you know, I don't know what we were arguing about, and I brought it into my meeting with him, and he's like, you know what? Just take his hands at night and go, let's pray. He's like, it's going to be so awkward, but just do it. I'm like, okay. So I did it, and I'm like, will you pray with me at night? You know, and it was awkward at first. It is very like, especially because you almost need to be in tune with what the person's going through in the day, because you're praying, you know, for them, and you have to, okay, well, what is he experiencing? What will be he'll be going through tomorrow, and I need to, you know, kind of pray over that with him. And it kind of makes you think into them, you know, a little bit more than what you would have actively. I think it takes a lot of intentionality, you know.
Well, it's the same way that we do with our kids. Like, we're pretty intentional. We have meals every day, and at the dinner table, we sit there and have questions about their days and trying to because we had to set up it to make it intentional. It's not just like, how was school? Great. Like
good.
those superficial type things,
Yeah.
but asking different questions. And like one day I looked up a bunch of weird questions. It was just me and my son, he's 8. And I just started asking him like these questions I never thought about asking him, like in different ways to get him to talk about his day. Like, what was one thing about today that you would have changed? And he's like, oh, I was like, well, okay, well,
I like that. That's good.
So being intentional. Also, like, we're trying to be great parents, but like, we're not putting that much effort into trying to be great spouses and to get,
because we're tired.
Because usually we're tired, and I get like all the bad part about your day, and you like you vomit on me, and then I try to solve all the problems. You're like, no, I just want you to listen. I don't want you to solve any of them. So it's like, so we have to find ways and try to, with us too, to be able to do that, to not let that go away. Hey, those kind of questions, like, what was one thing you would have changed? Not like, well, this person at work did this and this, like this parent, like whatever, like those kind of come natural. You don't have to talk about that. That's like, we just verbal diarrhea our bad stuff of the day. But those deeper questions. That
is a thing, like, but set a timer, right? That's the advice.
Yes.
That shouldn't just be
there you go. That's good. I also want people to know you can, like, it gets better. It gets a little easier to pray with each other too. Like what in our marriage prep materials, I love that the people who wrote it, they start by encouraging, we start by saying, just say grace together.
Yeah.
Like that's a prayer, saying grace before meals. So I think that's like a really good way. I think we think saying prayers has to be this elaborate, like really beautifully constructed paragraph. But like my husband and I just make sure, like most often it's when we're in bed and like one of us will lead in prayer, and it's like not beautiful, but it's just like we're praying.
Help him tomorrow.
Yeah. Like sometimes it's like, Jesus, we love you so much. Help us be a holy family. But like, we try to do a little bit more, but I think prayer looks different for everybody, and that's okay, Yeah.
But that's it. Just be real. And these high expectations, just be real and accept what you have.
Well, we came to that realization too, because also with our kids, it's like, we got to have this perfect prayer. We got to sit down. Everyone's going to be kneeling. Everyone's going to be in their hands like this.
No, we did not have her say they had to be kneeling with their hands.
I didn't say that. I'm saying that's what we have as an expectation of what good prayer within a family looks like. Like we say the rosary every day, and the kids don't move, and they're just perfect saints, and they're not arguing about who's got what rosary and who's sitting where, and the dog's jumping up. It's like, okay, we got to enter into that. Yeah, which is fine, okay. But that's part of this journey. It's like I'm going to be tired. There's someone's going to be sick. Someone's going to be crap. Like it's like entering that God's. The whole Bible is a messy family.
Right.
Let's just be honest. And so it's just like, don't set those standards of like, you got to be, this perfect prayer person.
Or even intimate conversations you try to start with your spouse. Don't expect perfection with that. If it's a mess, that's okay. And if it's a fail, that's okay too.
And if it turns into a fight, it's okay. That's what I've learned. Like, fighting can be doorways to intimacy. It just can be if we let it.
That's my strategy. And she doubts me all the time. She's like, you just want to fight. I'm like, no, I just want to. Like, I want to get through whatever this is. Let's head on. Let's get through it. And then, the intimacy comes, and it's like, let's sometimes you need to.
I think sometimes you like a fight.
That's just part of it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're different that way.
We know.
So,
all right.
So
jumping gears, unless there's anything more to say on
so
healthy intimacy in marriage, because we kind of covered like your story. Your kind of your platforms. There's another part of this white lotus blooming and taking back terms. Is there anything like, is that something that's a new thing, an old thing? Like, where are you at with that?
I started out as taking back the terms, more focus on women's health and female empowerment, because I feel like those terms have kind of been stolen from us. Like reproductive rights and those kinds of things. And authentic women's healthcare looks very different from that. And it was because of the way that our culture has kind of robbed us of those terms. It took me about 12 years or so to be diagnosed with endometriosis, because all we get offered is birth control for everything.
Yes.
We're not treated as individual women. Birth control is not even doing us a lot of favors.
No.
And for endometriosis specifically, it just covers it up. You guys, I have to plug in my computer because I forgot to do that. Give me 1 second.
We'll edit this out. You're all good.
Okay, great. So, okay, we're good. Y'all can see me.
Yeah, good.
So, what was I saying?
So with the health
taking
and
back terms.
Yes. So it took about 12 years for me to be diagnosed because all I was offered was birth control. And that just bothered me. And that's one of the reasons I believe I ended up infertile. Had I been diagnosed when I was a teenager, I might have been able to have children.
Wow.
And that is not a small statement.
No.
And so I just didn't want any other woman to have to go through what I went through. And like we were talking about this earlier, actually, like about suffering and being done to us and how God uses our suffering to help others. I just remember one day, just years and years into it, and just begging God to give me purpose, to make this suffering and this journey purposeful, because who wants to suffer for no reason?
Right.
And there's actually an encyclical on this called Salve Vici Dolores. No idea if I pronounced that right. But it's really beautiful and it talks about this. And actually, I've quoted a lot in one of my books. And so I begged him for prayer. We can ask for that. We can ask for grace. We can ask to make use of us. And so he did. And so I started out with this ministry, focusing more on that, called it Taking Back the Terms. So that was my effort. That's what I started speaking on. And then right after I had my hysterectomy, so many years into it, I changed to White Lotus Blooming because I just started the topics that I was branching out into a lot more topics. And White Lotus is significant because a lotus flower it blooms from murky waters, like dirty, ugly waters.
Yeah.
When you see them, they're usually like floating up top, but the roots are it's just nasty, but it creates this beautiful flower. And right before I had my hysterectomy, I just noticed God was putting a lot of white color, like white birds, and just the symbol of purity. And when I woke up from my surgery, actually, the first thing I saw in my recovery room, there was a white lotus on the wall.
Oh, wow.
And it was actually like, I was in this room. That was where they wrote like the room number and the nurse's name. And it was a white lotus. And so it was just this, a hysterectomy is something I had feared my entire life. But by the time actually through all this suffering and like this journeying, I actually had complete peace and acceptance before I even had the hysterectomy, which was a miracle. It was miraculous to me. And so when I woke up, that was just, I felt like God touching my heart and just saying like, I'm here, like, you're just getting started. There's so much more new life.
Yeah.
Even though like my uterus had just been removed, I can't have children anymore, but there's so much more out here for you to do. And so that's why I kind of changed it to White Lotus Blooming.
Okay.
And focus on all the other things that we've kind of talked about.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of, I'm glad that you talk about taking back the terms, because there are a lot of things that are coming to light, especially with the pushback on the birth control pill, that they're starting to see the downside. I feel like
our secular culture is starting to wake up a little bit
to that.
To it.
And what's the cause of most infertility? It's called like PS. What is it?
PCOS.
PCOS. A lot of
maybe it was the most. Yeah, PCOS and.
Yeah, there's no like talk, like people starting to talk about these other issues that, like you said, if it would have been somebody would have enlightened you, somebody who had gone through this, you would have found that person way before, having somebody to help walk you through these problems.
Just recently, because a friend of mine brought this to my attention, and I think I've seen a few articles on it. Oprah had, I think, Halle Berry, somebody like that.
Oh, and Dr. Mary, Mary something.
So it was a celebrity on the show with someone else, with Oprah, and they were talking about just women's health in general and how, like doctors were never really truly trained on a woman's body, and so this, like, it was very small amounts of any kind of education on it. And so they really were unpacking this in the secular world, and it's becoming a little bit more like, like you said, it just became, well, birth control, that'll help, that, you have that issue, because it was there was no training on finding, like, really just treating these, putting a Band-Aid on it like treating the symptoms, not
versus the
looking at the
underlying
actual
issues.
underlying issues. And I think that a lot of the medical, like there's like just I think they're starting. I'm not saying we're even anywhere near, but starting to see that there's so much in the medical fields that have just treated symptoms and not actually looked at the human body, whether it's
The
a
whole
male or
person.
female, as the whole system that we're just
Yes, the
looking
whole
at
person.
what it
That's
is,
right.
the whole person. And so
And the interconnection
treating-
between nutrition, the way that we
Yeah.
live a modern life, a lot of things have changed so fast, so quick, and hasn't been good science on a lot of this stuff. But like you said, it's like the answer has always been birth control pill. It's like,
Right.
well, you're tricking your body that you're pregnant.
So whether you're
in the
religious or
long term.
not,
Yeah, it's like
Exactly.
let's be
the
real with
secular is
this.
starting to catch up to
This
the
is
religious, that
not-
God's plan from the beginning has been
And
ingenious.
we're over here back here like, we've been doing it all along.
We've been here the whole time. I know. Well, and that's how we created FAbM Base. That's actually, I was recovering from my hysterectomy when my good friend Emily Frazee and I created FAbM Base. And although we're devout Catholics, we created the website to be appealing to people of any faith, any background, because this is actually someplace we can come together and agree on. Like, this is just good science.
Yes.
And that's lost a lot, I think, even in the church. And the people in the church don't understand what good science, fertility awareness, and restorative reproductive medicine is. So
yeah, that's so beautiful. That I started when I clicked on that and I started reading that, I started salivating. I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, yes, because as I've primarily taught 6th through 9th grade. I'm now a principal at an elementary school, but before that, I was 6th through 9th grade, and I taught freshman theology for a while too. And it was at that time that I personally started to really dive into theology of the body, right? Yeah. And I just got angry, that I felt robbed from what should have been taught to me as a young woman, so I can't wait. I'm an 11-year-old daughter. I'm definitely making sure that doesn't happen to her. But, what these girls are told and fed is such garbage, so I loved that taking back terms. The girls at the high school I worked at the time came up to me and another teacher who was a little bit more unaligned with the progressive secular world's view of things. This is a Catholic high school, but they knew what I stood for too, and they asked both of us to help sponsor a women's empowerment club. But those girls both were they were still fed, nourished by the secular version and worldview. But I really zeroed in on so much inherent dignity stuff with them and their worth and their value and all those things. I tried very hard to maintain that group to be a lot of what you're trying to unpack here, right?
Yeah.
Like, I wish we could have redefined those terms, but I felt like I was going up against a machine that was so indoctrinated into everybody, right? That it was really hard. It's really hard.
Well, it sounds like you saw them as whole persons,
right?
It's not like you can't put the fertility over here. Our fertility is intimately connected with our health, but we think we can separate it. So yeah,
right. Well,
that's great.
Yeah.
No. Well, we've taken up a ton of your time, but we appreciate it. I mean, I know that you're writing about it and you're speaking about it, but it still takes bravery to share things that are that you struggle with and that you've opened up about and that you seem to be on the other side of it, and you have the adoptive process is going well, and we'll be praying for you that this
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
It's beautiful to see people who don't give up, because the life is, there's so many kids that need love. So.
And it is, to hear a story like yours and to hear what you've gone through and what you've overcome, and especially within your marriage. And, it is something that if we don't tell these stories, speak them out loud, then people will suffer silently and not think that anybody else is out there, that, like how you said, especially people that feel so isolated within what I'm going through. There's nobody out there that's going to understand what I'm going through,
Yeah, it's so healing to see someone who just gets it, It's so to feel seen, help other people feel seen.
And that's intimacy, right?
Awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Full circle.
Yeah.
This is great. Thank you so much for coming on.
So what's the best place that people can find you? We have the fambase.org. We'll link all this stuff in the show notes, and then But you're on Instagram and all the other socials.
And marygbruno.com is my personal website where you can find everything that I do. My books, I have some free downloads. You have an email list, and then White Lotus Blooming on Facebook and Instagram.
Yes,
okay, perfect.
Cool. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mary, for taking the time and sharing your wisdom and knowledge and your stories with our audience. We really appreciate it.
Thank y'all for having me.
All right. God bless. Have a beautiful night.
God bless you.